Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another week. This week doing the Vision Divine self-titled debut album, something that I am almost surprised that it took us 75 episodes to get to. But before we get to Vision Divine, Chris, my man, how are you?
Good. Happy 3/4 of a century of episodes.
Yeah, I cannot believe that we are 75 episodes into this thing. Obviously, we are. Well, not obviously. We are recording this on Friday, and earlier today we dropped a little bonus episode where we got to speak to John Macaluso, drummer for Ark and TNT and Michael Romeo and a whole slew of projects. It was really nice for him to take an hour out of his very early morning to speak with us. And ironically, he actually played in Labyrinth and will be speaking with, or I should say speaking about, Olaf Thorson, for obviously his ties to Vision Divine. So it's a nice little synergy there, I think, which is kind of cool. But it was a nice conversation, and as an Ark fanboy, it was a real pleasure.
Yeah, I never really thought we would get to hear that much in-depth discussion about Ark. So that was a good get, and I thought that he told a lot of great stories, and he was very cool guest to have on. So
yeah, so we look forward to more guests in the future, and it was definitely a nice surprise, and happy to have him on. But before we get into Vision Divine, this week I felt like more albums and songs were released than just about any other week in probably the last 6 months. I was just absolutely inundated with new stuff. And I was wondering if anything stuck out to you or any of the stuff that you had a chance to kind of digest at this point, just because it was so much stuff that came out. So I apologize in advance for anything that we may omit, but it's not for lack of want. It's just a flood of stuff that came through.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember, I think I said to you a week ago, I was like, I have one album for 2022, Wilderun's Epigon album, which I've listened to, I think, 3 or 4 times now, and it's I think you used the word dense to describe it, so I've been trying to slowly digest it, and I find myself liking it a little bit more each time, but yeah, all of a sudden this week there was just a deluge of singles and albums and lots of stuff, and I mean, for me, the thing I was most looking forward to, it was actually on my most anticipated album of the year list, or the award or whatever at the end of the year, was the Battle Beast Circus of Doom album, which I got about halfway through today. This week has been crazy for me with studying for a licensing exam and work and stuff. I didn't really get to listen to as much music as I would have liked, but most of the new stuff all came out today anyway. So I look forward to hearing that. I liked what I heard from the first half, although most of the songs on the first half of the album I'd heard already because they were released as singles, but good stuff. I've seen a couple of people say that they liked it more than their previous release, so I think that the kind of some of the more country-ish kind of things on that last album might not have been everyone's cup of tea. So, but also Sonata Arctica dropped their Acoustic Adventures Volume 1 album, which I can only assume means there will be a Volume 2 at some point. And I got to hear a couple of tracks from this. I thought the acoustic version of The Rest of the Sun Belongs to Me, which was a B-side, was really good. I listened to the cover of the acoustic version of A Little Less Understanding, which I thought was one of my favorite songs from their last full-length album that I know a lot of people hated, but I liked that song a lot for whatever reason. And they released, I think, either a music video or a lyric video for The Sake of Revenge today. So I'm looking forward to that. I think it'll be interesting to hear some of those Sonata Arctica songs done in an acoustic setting. And a bunch of other albums came out. But singles wise, couple of two songs that by two of my all-time favorite bands. Voyager released yesterday. They released the video for Dreamer, and then the single dropped today. That is just, with Voyager, like you never know what the song's going to sound like because they're so varied. I mean, there's not a lot of other epic electro progressive pop power metal bands out there. So
they did a really good job with this one. They kept it under 3 minutes, which I think was designed for the whole, I guess, Eurovision contest. But they definitely still have that signature sound. So I thought that, like, for a band that was trying to do something kind of poppy to appeal to the masses, they did a really nice job with that song. It's I don't know if it's going to be their new direction, but it's certainly applicable or appropriate for the contest that they are in at this point for sure.
And we wish them the best of luck in that. And Power Quest released another single. They were my non-album single of the year last year. And if they don't release a full-length album this year, this one might be the winner for this year.
Spoiler. Is the plan for these songs to come on a full album? I have no idea.
I don't either. I think they probably were initially, and I know that because the band is kind of laying low right now. They're just kind of trickling out these songs just to keep everybody's just to whet everybody's appetite and keep everybody wanting more. And the new song's called "Now Is the Time." It was another song that was co-written by Glenn Williams, Steve Williams, and Ash Edison. And I like it a lot. I think it's a kind of a different style than the previous single, but I feel like it marries the new Power Quest sound with the old Power Quest sound. Steve's signature keyboard sound is right there, and Ash's vocals are great as ever. So good stuff. Just a lot to digest that came out today, and I still need to check out Kiss and Dynamite and Nocturna's new albums that came out today. Those are also on the list, and I should at least throw out a shout out to my friend Patrick Nickel, who's the drummer for Noise Cult. Their full-length album Seraphic Wizard came out today. I haven't got a chance to listen to it, so I'm literally just plugging it because he's a friend of mine, but I look forward to hearing that.
You are certainly entitled. I have to say that Nocturna was much better than I expected. I thought it was going to be good, and I really, really enjoyed it. I played it a couple of times. I was very impressed. I thought they did a nice job. One other album that I have not gotten to, but I heard the single for it, but it was released earlier today, and that is La Luz, The Chosen Ones. The album is called Paint the Sky. The single, The Chosen Ones, features Jordan Rudess, Simone Mularani, and of course the one and only Damian Wilson, who we spoke about a couple of weeks ago on vocals. I thought this song was fantastic, and if it is any indication, the album is going to be spectacular. So I look forward to that. He's a French composer, keyboard master, producer, etc., and he just got a whole all-star cast on this solo album. So I look forward to this.
Yeah, great names. I really enjoyed that track. It will be on my next playlist. I think I actually have already posted it to Spotify. Volumes 1 and 2 are already out 21 days into the year. So
lots of new music. But with that, let's get into some Italian power metal. Something we have not done as much of as I thought we would. And I was kind of looking back. I didn't see any DGM. I didn't see any Labyrinth. I didn't see any Vision Divine. We obviously did do Rhapsody back in the archives, but for some reason, no Secret Sphere. We've been derelict in our duties to the Italian power metal scene. So I'm glad you chose this, and I was curious as to why this album, why the debut, as opposed to any of the later releases, or possibly even a Labyrinth album for that matter. Why did you select this one this week?
I was actually stuck between this, and I was really wanted to talk about also Labyrinth's debut album, No Limit, which came out, I want to say, about 3 years before this one, and was the kind of the first time I had ever heard Fabio Leone on vocals, and the first time I ever heard Olaf Thorsson's guitar. But I remember when this album came out, I remember it being it was being advertised by the CD vendors as a Fabio Leone solo album, and so I remember seeing that Fabio Leone and Luca Turilli were both releasing these solo albums at the same time, and by the time it released, it was just called Vision Divine, and it turns out that the reason for this is because Labyrinth's original name was Vision, and Divine was going to be Olaf Thorsson's the name of, I believe, his first solo album or something to that effect. So they just combined the names, and I didn't know what to pick. And then when we were talking about Steel Panther and VD came up, it kind of just kind of cemented the choice for me. So I was like, well, that made it a little bit easier to decide. So another reason why I chose this album is because there's a song on it that is probably one of my all-time favorite songs, which I don't know I could say about any of the songs on No Limit. So I just, oh man, this whole album is one of those albums I always go back to because I just know that it's just going to be a really enjoyable, 45 to 50 minutes of just good old-fashioned Italian power metal, and it's it might as well have been the follow-up to No Limit, the debut Labyrinth album. But what would end up happening is Fabio would leave the band to join Rhapsody, and so when Labyrinth went on to make their second album, Return to Heaven Denied, which most people would probably argue is their finest work of all time, they had already hired Roberto Taranti to be their vocalist, and so I would love to ask Olaf Thorsson why kind of go back to this well when this was basically your band 3 years ago.
Yeah, because and it's funny. This was something that interested me as well. Just going through the lineup on this, obviously Fabio on vocals, Olaf on guitars, Andrea Torresini on bass, Andrea De Paoli on keyboards, Matt Stanisow on, and I'm sure I butchered that, on drums. It was basically the No Limits lineup. It was a solo project, but half of these guys were still in Labyrinth at the time. So I knew there was a synergy. I just didn't understand why, because, and I'll get to this, but a lot of these songs could have easily been on that Labyrinth debut album. It was, you almost wonder if some of this stuff was written or some of the ideas had come out a couple of years earlier. But when Return to Heaven Denied went in a little bit of a different direction than No Limit, you wonder if it's, whether some of these ideas were still marinating and eventually just found their way onto the Vision Divine album. Peeking into the future, Olaf would actually leave Labyrinth for about 10 years shortly after the next Vision Divine album and kind of devote himself exclusively to Vision Divine, ultimately changing singers, bringing in Michelle Lupi to sing on vocals, before obviously bringing Fabio back, and then going back to Labyrinth and then deciding to do both bands as like a full-time thing or splitting the time between the two, if you will. It's a really interesting timeline, I guess, is the best way to say it.
And now he has a third band in Shining Black that he's doing with Mark Bowles, who was tabbed to be Labyrinth's vocalist at one point when Roberto Taranti was leaving the band. I mean, it's like the Italian power metal is like the ultimate revolving door of the genre.
And John Macaluso actually said that when we spoke to him, saying that like it's such a small community and everybody knows everybody else, and it seems like once you're in it, you're always in the Rolodex, so to speak. So if it's your turn, if you're next up, you get brought in and you do the project. But
I just realized today that Oleg Smirnov is the keyboard player for both Labyrinth and Eldritch. So
right, and appears on later Vision Divine albums too, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it's just a small world. But this was a one hell of a release, and I'm going to be honest. Send Me an Angel to this day has never really clicked with me. Like it's had its moments, but I thought that it was inferior to this album. Although I have to admit, once I heard the Michelle Lupi albums, and there were two in particular, those first two albums that he had recorded with the band, Stream of Consciousness in 2004 and The Perfect Machine 1 year later. Those two albums for me were always the pinnacle of some of this Vision Divine material. So I was happy to go back to this album because I haven't listened to it in a very long time. And I kept thinking to myself, I like this album. I have fond memories of the album because of the time that it came out and how, I had to get my hands on it back in 1999. But I always thought it was just a little bit, I don't know if I don't want to say inconsistent. I don't think there's a bad track on the album, but there's two standout tracks that to this day just are some of the better, or if not the best, power metal tracks you'll ever hear. I'm curious to see if there's overlap between my thoughts and yours as to whether or not we have the same opinion as to those songs.
I have two, so I'd be curious to hear what. Yeah,
let's get into it. The album opens up with a 4-minute rocker, New Eden, and if you've never heard Italian power metal, I think that this pretty much sums it up right there. This starts with kind of like a keyboard intro that really pops, and there's elements of atmospheric keyboards, classical composition here as well. But what jumps out to me right away is that Fabio Lione sounds just about as powerful as ever. And even though he did a great job on that first Labyrinth album, he sounds better and just a more accomplished vocalist right off the bat on this first song.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think just the overall sound quality is such a huge step ahead of what No Limit sounded like. I mean, even Return to Heaven Denied was a massive step forward in the production, but so was this. But I think around this time is when I started to realize that how much of a chameleon Fabio Lione is as a vocalist, because I remember, I want to say that I actually heard Rhapsody's Legendary Tales before I heard Labyrinth's No Limit album, and the fact that he had a stage name on No Limit, I don't know that I ever would have realized it was the same singer, just because of how he sang so differently stylistically on those two albums. And this album, it's kind of like he went back to that kind of style that he was doing when he was in Labyrinth, rather than sound like he does in Rhapsody. It's really amazing. And when you hear him now when he's in Angra, and I mean, I saw him live with Camelot, like he morphs into wherever he is needed. It's a really impressive thing. I mean, even his operatic vocals that you don't hear him do a lot, but like if you ever get a chance to see the Angra Angels Cry anniversary DVD Blu-ray, he does this duet with Tarja where the both of them are singing, I believe it was Stand Away, in these opera, like he sounds like this like a Pavarotti style opera vocalist. It's very impressive.
Yeah, it's wild, and I'll throw a real gem in there from 1998, around the same time. He had been on an album called A New Religion by a band called Athena, another Italian power metal band, and he sounds like a different vocalist on that album. And if you didn't know who it was, you may not even pick up on the fact that it was Fabio. It was fascinating how he's able to kind of just go in and out of these different, like,
he's also the singer
styles
for Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about a chameleon.
Not a lot of people know that. He goes by a stage named Terry Joe. But, Terrence Joseph.
If anything happens to Corpse Grinder, we know who's going to fill in. It's fantastic. But yeah, he just does a phenomenal job. And I thought, and to be honest, I prefer his singing on this album to the Rhapsody stuff. I really do, just because, I don't know, for some reason, I just think it lends itself even better to the music. But, my first thoughts are, like, power metal fans are going to eat this up, and the album's 22 years old, almost 23 years old. There's a lot going on in this track for a 4-minute power metal tune, but you can tell that Olaf's songwriting, I think, is more mature than it was on No Limits, just because I don't know, like, it's just there's a little more complexity and nuance to some of these tracks as opposed to what he had been doing even 3 years earlier.
Yeah, and in spite of, or despite the fact that, Olaf is a guitar player and Fabio is a vocalist, they co-wrote pretty much this entire album. It's very keyboard driven,
Yes.
considering that Andrea De Paoli, he doesn't really have a ton of songwriting credits on this album, but the songs were written for him to shine, and there's a lot of, especially on this first track, I love how just keyboard driven it is, and it goes right into the next track on the Wings of the Storm is the same. Like, you just really, those keys are really prominent, and I love how the second track kind of just starts out unassuming, and then Fabio just comes in.
Yeah, that first note, and I have it in my notes. That first note is like bombastic. I don't know other word to describe it, but he comes in with a vengeance. I think New Eden is a good track, but I think On the Wings of the Storm is a better track. A really, really, one of those things where, like, I don't know whether it's the double bass drum or just the keyboard sounds in the background, or Fabio just showing off. Really, really good. I think the verses are fantastic. I think the chorus is a bit repetitive and a little bit weak, but overall, I think the track is quite good. There's this little bridge at the end, which I absolutely love, and I think the outro is fantastic. So, other than the choruses, this is a really good song, and I like it even better than the first one.
Yeah, I agree. I think New Eden's a good way to kick things off. I actually really enjoy the version that they recorded live with Loopy. He does. I love hearing him kind of sing these older Vision Divine tracks, just because I have such an affinity for this album, and I agree with you that the follow-up album, Send Me an Angel, didn't really do a lot for me. I was disappointed that they didn't cover Real Life Send Me an Angel.
I mean, talk about appropriate.
Yeah, and Lord covered us, thankfully, last year with that. But it was cool to hear. I believe he did New Eden, The Whisper, and I think maybe one or two tracks from the second album. So it was cool to hear him do some of these Fabio tracks. But I thought it was a good opener, but I think I like that On the Wings of the Storm kind of picks up even more on the second track. So yeah, I'm with you. I do like this song a little bit better. And then it just goes, I think, goes to another great track, Black Mask of Fear, which also starts with almost like this harpsichordish kind of intro. And then just kind of kicks into like this, kind of drum driven like intro, and man, it's just 3 songs in a row that I think each one just gets a little bit better than the last.
I have always struggled with this track, and for some reason, I was really wondering if this time around I was going to kind of have a little bit more of an affinity for it. And the short answer is yes. I do think it was definitely a bit better this time around. I for some reason, though, I never totally cared for this song, and I'm not 100% sure why. I think I was just waiting for that big payoff in the song, like just that moment, that explosion, and I don't think I'd ever quite got there. It's a touch slower than On the Wings of the Storm, but I do enjoy the instrumental section where they really speed it up, and they have like this dueling guitar and keyboard solo, which is really, really cool. So kudos for that. But even though it's not, I guess, my favorite track on the album, you can see that they're heating up to something. We haven't gotten there yet, but there's a crescendo coming. I'm starting to think that we may have the same crescendo, but we're not there yet. The fourth track is a song called Exodus, and it's the first 4 tracks really are all about the same length, about 4 minutes, maybe a shade over. This one, unlike the keyboards, start to the song, it starts with a kind of a guitar solo, which is really almost offbeat. It almost sounds like an outer space type of thing going on. I don't have a lot to say about this particular track other than I feel like this could have easily been on No Limits. This track, maybe more than any of the others, really sounds like that early Labyrinth material. And I like the chorus, how it has that like gallop to it, which you haven't really heard on the 3 prior tracks. And it kind of slows down towards the middle and then gets really, really quiet and then picks up steam again before fading out during the outro. I think it helps the chorus to pop, which is something that I don't say all the time on this album, but it helps break up the repetition. Not much else to say. It's a good track. It's not my favorite, but it has its place on this album for sure.
Yeah, I like that the first 4 tracks all kind of have their own flavor. Like they could have easily just wrote the same basic type of song over and over again, and this album is very varied for what I think is like a genre of power metal, like the Italian power metal of the late 90s, that I think a lot of people say they think it's repetitive, or a better word is escaping me. Derivative, I guess, would be it. But I think this album proves that that's not really an accurate expectation, because I think that like these first 4 songs are all very good songs, but they don't sound alike going from song to song. And this one, like you said, it has that kind of that gallop in the chorus, and it kind of, like you said, slows down a bit. And again, it's like, I think it does a really good job of really showcasing how good all the musicians in this band are, but especially Olaf on guitar and Fabio on vocals, and just the keys kind of just really being prominent. And again, like you ask, like, why this album? And I always tend to gravitate towards like power metal that is very key driven. I mean, I love Power Quest. I mean, that all their songs have been mostly written by a keyboard player. Even like a band like Majestica, when they were Rainseed, even though, Tommy's a guitar player, a lot of their songs were keyboard driven. And so like, that's the kind of stuff that I think it pulls me in a little bit more, for whatever reason. I just really enjoy that sound. And when there's a keyboard guitar kind of dual situation, that it just sucks me right in. Like, I think probably why I loved Sabaton so much the first time I heard them.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think that's part of the reason, and I'm making a gross generalization, so I want to be clear. I'm not counting every band that I'm about to speak about, but I think that's part of what's missing in the U.S. power metal scene, that a lot of it is in that Iced Earth or a Jag Panzer type of vein, which is good, but it's not, well, Iced Earth, maybe not, but like that Jag Panzer kind of vein, but like, it's missing that keyboard element, which I think really makes some of these Italian bands and some of the Finnish bands and some of the Swedish bands pop a little more for me. It's an element that generally has been missing over the last 20 years of U.S. power metal, generally speaking.
Jag Panzer.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm just
we get to track number 5, The Whisper. Do you have any thoughts about this track?
This is the greatest song ever written.
The way I describe it is this, and apparently we are on the same page here. The band hit a bunch of singles. The bases were loaded, and they knocked it out of the park and hit an absolute grand slam with this track. This song is my song of the week. It's probably my song of the entire early Vision Divine period. This thing is an epic, epic, epic tune, and I think it's one of the best power metal tracks of all time.
Yeah, everything you just said. It's my track of the week too.
Nice.
It hit me in, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago. I was going back and listening to this album, and I was just like, oh my God, this song is just so good. And it's just the whole thing start to finish. It starts out, it kind of like fades in, and once Fabio just kicks off, it's just like it's, has that speedy kind of sound to it. The bridge is awesome, the chorus is awesome, the solos are awesome. This is one of my favorite power metal songs by any band ever.
It is so epic.
I knew it was going to be my song of the week before I even picked the album.
I have to be honest. I go back to when we were in high school. I mean, we've been listening to this stuff for 25 years, and I go back to when we were in high school. I don't know that I ever recognized the brilliance of this track until, like, I don't know. I don't want to say this time around. I knew it was a great track, but it really popped for me this time. And I feel like on an album where there's a lot of good songs, this is one of the absolute gems, and I cannot impress upon the people that are listening enough. This album needed a big hit. I mean, hit, I don't mean radio hit, but it needed something that was going to set it apart from other albums. This is one of, at least in my opinion, 2 tracks that really, really do that. Very, very similar to that early Labyrinth sound. Great verses, great choruses, great lyrics. It's just from top to bottom. Is it a masterpiece?
This is probably my favorite song that Olaf was ever involved in all honesty. Like it's my favorite Vision Divine song for sure, but I might like it more than my favorite Labyrinth song, honestly. I just think this song is that good. I don't really know what else to say other than I don't even know. Like, it's just, I get so amped anytime I listen to it. It's such a just like pump you up kind of song. And again, and maybe we can post it this week, but the live version with Loopy, he hits this note at the end of this song that it's just like, my goodness. So I'm a big fan of that version too. But I mean, I think I also remember seeing there was a Vision Divine anniversary show. I don't know if it was like a 10-year whatever, but I think Fabio was still not in the band, and he must have come back to do the anniversary show, and they did this song too. And it's just like, I'm with you. It didn't really resonate with me when I first heard the album. I just remember really liking the album on the whole, but nothing outside of the one cover song really kind of stuck out at the time. But over the years, this is one of the most played songs in my iTunes. It's just really one of my favorite songs ever. And
I think it's a good place to interject. I was very fortunate to see them live in 2006. I was very close to seeing them live the following year in 2007 when I was in Rome. Actually, no, I'm lying. I guess it was in 2004. I almost saw them when I was in Rome for a festival. Actually, they had played a festival at a tennis stadium in Rome with them and Helloween, and I couldn't find it. And I was looking all over the place, and I just could not find the place. And I was trying to
That's called Van Gogh syndrome.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm looking for this courtyard. No, I could not find them. And I was asking people on the street, Teatro de Tennis, and they were just not understanding what I was saying. And I just never made it to the show. And I was walking around so much trying to find the venue that by the time I missed Vision Divine, and then I said to myself, I've already missed half the reason I'm going to the show. I wound up seeing them 2 years later here in the States at Prog Power. But if memory serves, they did not play anything off of the first 2 albums. They played for about an hour, and they just didn't touch the first 2. And in retrospect, it would have been so cool to hear this live. But alas, it was not meant to be. Can only hope that they come back again in the future.
Oh, I would love that. I haven't had a chance to see them live, although I've probably seen every member of the band in some form or fashion
right.
perform. I've seen Fabio sing for 7 different bands. I think Cannibal Corpse is the only one I haven't heard him sing with yet.
70,000 Tons of Metal is taking shape in next January. So if you're going to see it, I'm sure you'll see it there.
Beautiful. Yeah, it would be really cool. But again, like Fabio is not in Vision Divine anymore.
Right.
Again, he returned to the band for a second stint. I don't even who's their singer now. I don't even know. Did they announce it? I don't even remember.
I honestly don't know. I know that let's put it this way. They had come out in 2019 with an album. He sang on it, but I believe that was it. And since then, it's been a little bit quiet on that front. Maybe we can find that out and get back to everyone.
Ivan Giannini. That's his name. He was the vocalist from the band. Actually, he still is the vocalist for Dirdian. And he was also in Elegacy. Those are the bands I've heard of that he has credits on. But he has been the vocalist for Vision Divine since 2018, and he I think he recorded I guess a few singles with the band. And was he their looks like he was the singer on their most recent release. So
when all there you go, there you have it.
When All the Heroes Are Dead, he was their vocalist. So yeah, that's who their vocalist is now. And little fact I just found out from looking it up is that he tried out to be the vocalist for Dragon Force after ZP left the band in 2010. So
thank you for that little nugget.
Little Ivan Giannini trivia thing, and he was also bass player for Cannibal Corpse at one point.
Yes, I have to say after the Whisper was over, the band was very smart, and they didn't put another track on, like another normal track on the album. And by normal, I mean just another power metal track. They actually come back with Forgotten Worlds, which is an instrumental track, and you kind of need a little bit of a come down because nothing would have compared to the Whisper. So they mix it up and they come back with this sixth track, which is an instrumental track. And it's interesting. They have like a church organ which starts, and it kind of almost reminds you of like a video game, like when you go into the church or something like that. It almost starts like a power ballad, but then it certainly picks up. I don't think it's the most memorable of tracks. I think there was a lot of ideas tossed in here, almost very progressive, I guess, in that approach. But I still prefer the Labyrinth instrumental tracks like Feel and other tracks they've done over the years. Vertigo, one of the absolute best. But almost as a placeholder, I think it does serve its place on the album.
Yeah, so this is the first of two tracks that Andrea De Paoli has writing credits on. I think he gets the full credit for this one, and it kind of reminds me of a live show where the band plays like one of their best songs, and it's like, all right, we're gonna do like Fabio's going to go out and have a smoke, and the rest of the band's going to do your run of the mill live power metal solo part. So yeah, I agree with you that this is well placed because it's just kind of a hard song to follow with like a traditional song with vocals in it. So take it down a notch, and this song's fine for what it is. I mean, I don't think it's they're not blowing any doors down on instrumental power metal songs, but it's definitely a cool I like kind of like With a Minute to Go, where it kind of just quiets down and it's just this cool keyboard solo, very like atmospheric sounding.
Yes,
but good stuff. It's really, like you said, it's kind of like a almost like a segue into the second half of the album.
And the next track is the title track and the band's namesake, Vision Divine. This is probably the most underrated song for me on the album, just in terms of I don't know. It was another song that I guess never really resonated with me too much when I was a kid, but this is a real banger of a tune, a mid-paced song. Fabio again showing off at the beginning. His range is just out of control, and just a very dynamic tune that's kind of like a throwback for me to, again, that No Limits era. Amazing guitar solo, very, very different from what Olaf usually plays. And the way I would just describe it is an eccentric guitar solo. Instead of having like the dueling pianos and guitar solos, they would actually get two separate solos on this track. First the guitar and then the keyboard solo after that. And again, I just think it's one of the most underrated tracks on the entire album.
I happen to agree with you. a little bit more on the like kind of a like mid tempo, but I think it always makes me happy too, as somebody with OCD, to look at my iTunes and see a song by the song called Vision Divine from the album Vision Divine by the band Vision Divine.
Yeah, it just it sums it up in a nutshell, and quite frankly, it's I always, for some reason, the namesake tracks always are kind of a disappointment, but this one holds up. I like this track. I do.
Yeah, well, it's hard to live up to like the song that you're going to name after your band, or vice versa, whatever it is, the order, I guess. I always think of the song Green Day by Green Day from their very first album, and I always felt like that was very indicative of what the band was at the time. But yeah, this is a good tune. And again, like, I feel like after this like really fast paced track like The Whisper, it kind of slows things down a little bit with kind of a more mid-paced type song, but I enjoy this kind of style. I think they do this type of song really well.
I think what's interesting to me is that they move on to the next track, which, depending on which version of the album you have, or I guess which, where you imported the album from, my next track on my album is a cover. Some people have it at the end of the album, but I'm going to just put it here because I thought it was interesting. All of a sudden, there's a cover of Europe's The Final Countdown in the middle, or I should say 2/3 of the way through the album. And I always found that to be interesting because you'd think it would be at the end, but no, they just kind of stick it, 2/3 of the way through the album. And it is such a good cover. And I've always thought that this was one of the better covers that anyone's done. And the band has done a lot of good covers over the years. They're
Definitely
kind of buried in certain ways, shapes, and forms, but they've done Gutter Ballet. They've done, I think they even did a Dream Theater cover on one of their albums, if I'm not mistaken. It's just a really eccentric mix of album, choices for some of these albums, but really, really cool stuff. And it started with Europe's The Final Countdown. And what always, I'm not going to go into detail about the song. Everyone knows the song, but I thought that they just really encapsulated everything that was great about that song and kind of just mirrored it on the album.
Yeah, for sure. They did cover Dream Theater's Another Day. They covered Halloween's Eagle Fly Free on the Keepers of Jericho tribute album. They covered Aha's Take on Me on the second album, Send Me an Angel.
Yep.
So I had the Japanese version of this album. My aunt and uncle found it at a mom and pop, kind of the northeastern Pennsylvania's answer to Slip Disc.
There you go.
And so they got me the Japanese version of this, and this was a hidden track after of Light and Darkness. There'd be just like several minutes of silence, but then if you look at your CD player and be like, why is this a 14-minute track? And then all of a sudden you hear The Final Countdown kick in. And it's funny because I actually, when I ripped the CD onto my iTunes, I pulled this song out and I placed it in between Vision Divine and The Miracle, because I'd seen that track listing on another version, and I thought that was better, I guess.
Well, I did not have the Japanese version, and they stuck it as the 8th track, so I can totally understand that. But it's just, to me, it makes sense that it would be the last track or a hidden track, but to stick it in the middle of the album, it's a kind of a gutsy move. I commend them for that.
It's also like a very true to form cover. It sounds a lot like Europe's version, but with Fabio singing. But the rest of the song is almost it's a little bit heavier, a little bit more metal, but I mean it's a pretty, they didn't really try to make it too differently. And they didn't need to. It's great.
No, yeah, it's a great song in its own right. After that ends, we get to kind of like the back end of the disc. And for me, we get to what I can only describe as the second home run track, The Miracle. This is a beautiful song. It starts with a fantastic, fantastic piano intro before ultimately picking up with one of the better riffs on the album, and obviously that signature double bass drum. This is another just absolutely fantastic, fantastic power metal tune. Everything from the galloping choruses, the layered vocals, which are a really nice touch in certain spots. And it's a song just puts a smile on my face. It's a fun tune. It's an uplifting tune. And I don't know. Everything about this song I think is fantastic. And another one that I just wish I could hear live.
It's this was my other
we agree.
Yeah, those two songs, The Whisper and The Miracle, are definitely the high points on this album. I'm looking back at some of these old playlists, these old mixtapes that I made back in the day, and I have in 2000 I had made a mix, and the first time I ever put a Vision Divine song on one of my mixtapes, it was this song. So this must have been the one that stuck out to me the most when I first heard the album. And then I think it would be in 2011 I put The Whisper on a playlist 12 years after it came out.
It deserved it, and maybe it needed to marinate a bit, but it's funny, we don't always agree, and obviously our top 50 lists were different, and we sometimes I'll be a little critical of certain songs that you love and vice versa, but we are in definite agreement on this one. That these two songs stand out above and beyond the others. Not that the other songs are bad, but these are two just absolute gems on this debut.
There's like this sweeping keyboards that are going on in the back, like that. Again, like it's just such a wonderful balance of guitar and keyboard, and yeah, this is just a real beauty, a real gem, like you said. And I mean, if you're going to listen to two songs from this album, listen to this and The Whisper. But I mean, hell, listen to the whole thing, because I just think this is a really good album. And these two songs just are like two exclamation points on this really just great album.
I don't.
Oh wait! There's two more songs.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to the end yet. So, Forever Young. What are your thoughts on that one?
I was disappointed it wasn't a Rod Stewart cover.
Surprisingly, right?
This was another song that reminded me of Labyrinth. Actually, the beginning, that kind of guitar riff right at the beginning.
Yeah,
it kind of gave me what was the you mentioned it before, the Legend B remix or whatever.
The Feel remix.
It reminds me of how Feel kind of jumps in. I guess it's kind of just like a go-to riff that Olaf does, but this is a good song. I feel like maybe they should have let The Miracle be the last song. Kind of. I mean, they went with a ballad, and I'm never gonna like disagree with a band for finishing an album with a ballad, but I feel like this song kind of ends up being kind of like the popcorn match of the album because it's placed in between one of the best songs on the album and that outgoing ballad. So it's kind of like a crap slot to be in when it's not like a blow your socks off kind of song. And so I think it's a good song. It's not on par with the two that we are lauding, but it's good, and I think it kind of just it's the last kind of fast song before we kind of end things with the ballad. If you're not listening to the hidden final countdown version of the album, it's a good song, and it's quite frankly, it's probably better than I remember it. The one thing I like about it more than anything is that there's like these little solos, little keyboard solos, very, very small,
and little guitar solos like layered throughout this whole thing, not in an overbearing kind of way, and not in an instrumental section, just kind of layered throughout the whole thing, which I thought was a nice touch. But the contrast to that is I thought the drumming was good, but just very repetitive, and it was just kind of like, all right, get to it already. So it like a weird contrast there. But so part of it I loved, part of it I wasn't crazy about. But to your point, it kind of just leads you into, much like the Luca Turilli solo album that we talked about, a ballad to kind of wrap some of this stuff up, of light and darkness. And I guess the album kind of needed a ballad, and this was certainly it. It's a piano track that gives way to Fabio, and it's just and that's what the track is. And then of course, a beautiful female vocalist comes in at the end. I have no idea who that is. Do you?
That's
have
Fabio.
any idea? Yeah. What?
That's Fabio.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, he is a chameleon. Nothing would surprise me. But this is a really like ominous sounding tune, but I kind of like it, and it's something that I didn't care for when I was younger. I probably just skipped over it. But
it's actually a very young Yannis Papadopoulos.
Yeah, that I will buy, because he some of the notes that man hits. For anyone listening who's not aware, that is the singer for Beast in Black, and he is another chameleon for different reasons. But my goodness, this song leaves you wanting more, which I guess is a good thing, because I certainly enjoyed the listen each time this week.
Yeah. So joking aside, the singer is actually an Italian Eurobeat singer. We've been talking a lot about Eurobeat off air today, and how many members of these bands are somehow linked to that style of music. But she goes by the stage name Domino, but her name is Alessandra Gatti. But I don't know how she ended up on this album. She also makes an appearance on the second album, Send Me an Angel, as well. But yeah, I thought that was a really nice touch. And like you said, this album didn't have any ballads leading into this, so I think this is kind of perfect to kind of cap things off with this kind of mellow tune. It reminds me a bit of another album we discussed, Legacy of Kings by Hammerfall, where they decided to end a power metal album with a ballad like this, and I think it really works. And this was the other song that Andrea De Paoli had songwriting credit on with Fabio and Olaf. But I gotta say, a really just good tune. It's kind of long for a ballad. It's actually one of the longer songs on the album. Other than The Miracle, it's the longest track, but it's just a very beautiful song, very very heartfelt. Fabio just shines as he always does. And it's funny because I remember when I got this album and I had the Japanese liner notes where they have that little insert where everything is translated into Japanese. And I remember in English, it said all songs written by Tordiglione and Magnani. And I was like, who the hell wrote this album? Is this like Fabio Leone? And I didn't realize that this was their real names. Members of Labyrinth have a history of ridiculous stage names. But I mean, I didn't even realize until today that Olaf Thorsson's real name is not actually Olaf Thorsson. And Fabio Leone's real name is not actually Joe Terry. So
who would have ever guessed, right?
Learning a lot. I'm learning a lot today.
Well, I was going to ask you, but I'm going to withdraw the question. I'll just put it out there. But I was going to ask you if you like this era better than the Michel Lupi stuff that would follow a couple of years later. But I'm not going to ask you now, because eventually we'll do those albums, and I think I'll pose the question then.
Yeah, I think it's a good question too, because I feel like the band sounds very different.
It does, and I think that the songwriting was different, and that's why I'm curious to see your thoughts on that. So let's put that aside for now, and I'll just ask, the question that I always ask: scale of 1 to 10, and try to put nostalgia aside. What are you rating this album?
No, I will never put nostalgia aside. How long have you known me? This is an 8.5 for me. I think that it's just a really solid album with two standout tracks. This is just one of those. Just one of those records, like I said before, that I just go back to, and I just know, like, it's like a comfort, like your favorite comfort food, like mom's meatloaf or chicken parm. You just go to it and you know it's gonna sate you, that need for power metal, or if you're looking specifically for Italian power metal, or you just want to hear Fabio just tear it up vocally. But yeah, this is definitely nostalgia plays, I think, a small part in this, but I think that in all honesty, it is just a really good record. And we talk a lot about like production values and stuff, but a lot of bands in like this mid to late 90s time, I find that that's when like bands were really starting to find their way production wise, especially if you go back and you listen to that debut Labyrinth album. It's a little rough. It's a little tinny, I guess. There's definitely worse, but this absolutely blows it away, I think, just sonically.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a step in the right direction. I actually prefer the sound on Return to Heaven Denied, which came out, I guess, a year or two prior. But it's certainly not bad. To me, the album is an 8. A very respectable, a very good score. But because those two standout tracks take a good album and make it a very good or a borderline excellent album. But it was nice to go back. I am probably partial to those two Michel Lupi albums. Spoiler. But admittedly, I haven't checked out some of that stuff in a while. So I'm going to keep it on my list so that when I'm curious or I guess desperate for a choice, I'm going to certainly pick one of those albums, because I think we would do a lot worse than talking about that, because to your point, the sound changes over the next couple of years for them. So within about 5 years of this album, it would almost sound like a completely different band.
Yeah, I in all honesty, like, I didn't listen to a lot of the other Vision Divine albums nearly as much as this one. I think I just like you said, like, Send Me an Angel just didn't really pull me in, and the Loopy era kind of started at a time where I was kind of like falling out of love for a brief time with metal, so it kind of passed me by. I got back into Vision Divine when Fabio rejoined the band, oddly enough. So
you know, you're almost making me change my album of the week. I'm not, but we got to get on that, because you are missing some
especially
really
because I recognize how incredible of a vocalist Michel Lupi is, but I also kind of found that, like, the little that I heard from some of the early Lupi albums, like, I thought that the production didn't really jive with me that well, and I don't know, for whatever reason, there were just things that and I was such a Fabio mark that part of it too. So it's definitely something I would be very very interested in revisiting
in due time. There was, transitioning to some of the news items this week. There was a lot of new albums and new singles, and there was a lot of news items. So I apologize in advance if we don't get to most things, but a couple of tour announcements that I think I would really like to bring to people's attention if they may have missed them. The first is a called the North American Siege 2022. Arch Enemy doing a co-headlining tour with Behemoth with special guests Napalm Death. That is going to be a brutal tour. It begins on April 16th out west in Tempe, Arizona, before doing a run all the way to New York and Philly and Worcester, Mass., and then going back out to the West Coast a month later, where they conclude the tour out in Los Angeles. So that is a heavy tour. I know that they're doing a New York show on the 28th of April. I have it on my calendar. I've not seen all of those bands, and particularly I am a fan of Behemoth. I would really be curious to see them live. And within a day of that, they announced another tour, a tour that begins April 29th in New York, before going out west and then coming back east, ending in Baltimore on May 29th. And this is a really interesting tour. It's Hypocrisy doing a headlining run with The Agonist, black metal horror fanatics Carrick Angren, and an opening band, Hideous Divinity, which I'm not familiar with, but I have seen Carrick Angren live. They put on a fantastic show if you're into that sort of black metal. And to be honest with you, I am into the Agonist, and I like the new Hypocrisy album, so I'm very curious to see that as well. But two very, very heavy tours that were announced, earlier this week.
Sure.
Wait till 70,000 tons, my friend. Wait till 70,000 tons.
I heard that. I heard that Power Glove is going on tour, and that got me excited. So
very good. Two other more somber notes. Meatloaf, the famous, obviously musician from with some of the songs like "I Do Anything for Love" and Paradise by the Dashboard Light. This is a musician who passed away earlier today, and we'd be remiss not to mention him because in terms of frontmen and stage presence, he really set the stage for a lot of what you would see in the 80s with some of these rock bands, and just an outpouring of support for him as he passed away earlier, I guess earlier today or yesterday. But everyone from Dave Mustaine to Slash from Guns N' Roses to Brian May of Queen, I mean, everyone just had nothing but kind words for this man and for all that he gave to rock music. I didn't realize this, but Bat Out of Hell is a top 10 selling album of all time, and that's just absolutely remarkable to me.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
There you go. I'm glad.
Actually, one thing, you want to tie Meatloaf into metal? Did you know that Meatloaf is Scott Ian's father-in-law?
Legit?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a great story he told on Chris Jericho's podcast about going to meet his girlfriend's father for the first time and it being Meatloaf, and how
I had no idea.
Yeah, how unbelievably intimidating it was to meet this rock legend. And, so there you go, a little tie-in. But I recall Meatloaf kind of had a resurgence in the early 90s when Bat Out of Hell 2 came out with and that song "I'd Do Anything for Love," which I always thought, I think it was just overplayed, but there was a couple of tracks that they made music videos for. Rock and Roll Dreams Come Through, especially one of my favorites, but also Objects in the Rearview Mirror May Appear Closer Than They Are. Nice, succinct short title, but I just remember being impressed that Meatloaf was still having MTV play.
I remember that. And it was wild because it was like a resurgence out of nowhere, and he was everywhere all at the same time. But kudos to him. Obviously,
let me tell you, Paradise by the Dashboard Light was a classic high school dance song.
Yeah. It's I think it probably would be to this day if people were still listening to rock music. But alas, here we are. One other somber note that I'd be remiss not to mention, a band that we've talked about in different capacities over the last couple of weeks is the Norwegian prog band Moron Police. They lost their drummer earlier this week after passing away from injuries sustained as a result of a car accident. This came as a bit of a shock to me. I'm a big fan of this band. I have to admit, I only got into them with their last album, and then I went back and checked out some of their older material, but it's a real tragedy. This Thor Peterson has been with the band since the beginning, and what I like about him is that it's a prog band that does not take themselves overly seriously, and the drummer has passed away at a very young age, unfortunately. So our hearts go out to them. For sure. And I thought that it would be very fitting to do, or to cover their most recent album in our next episode, just as kind of a bit of a tribute. So for that reason, I think that we'd be remiss not to come back to a Moron Police album, given the tragedy that's taken place. And we'll do A Boat on the Sea, which came out in 2019. As I had mentioned during our Top 50 episode, they had come out with an EP last year, The Stranger and the High Tide, but I'd rather we'll stick to a full-length release. We'll do their most recent album, A Boat on the Sea, next week.
I have to say the song Captain Awkward from that album is such a favorite song of mine, so I think I've only really listened to the whole album like one time, so that's a great choice. I wish it was under better circumstances, but I hopefully we do justice to our fallen friend from More on Police. Just awful news.
Yeah, no question about that. Wish we would end it on better terms, but nonetheless, we enjoyed the Vision Divine episode. We look forward to covering some More on Police next week, and then we will come back in February with our second request album of the year, which we have picked out, but we will not divulge until next week. So a little something to keep people on the edge of their seat. I know they're waiting with bated breath, but it's something that is long overdue as well. So I look forward to that. And then obviously
it's not Cannibal Corpse.
Yeah, although going with the theme, I guess it would be appropriate. We have not had a Cannibal Corpse request yet.
You don't want to overdo Fabio Leone's vocals.
Well, you don't want to extend the vocal cords and everything else. I'm totally with you. We've actually not done a death metal album, which I'm just putting that out there.
No.
So February, maybe time, but we'll get there. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reaching out to us. We love hearing from everybody. The number of people listening has gone up dramatically, and so we really appreciate that. We know you're out there. Keep engaging with us. Hit us up on social media, and we will come back next week with some More on Police as a tribute to Mr. Thor Peterson. Chris, congratulations on finishing the test. I'm very happy for you, and go and enjoy some of the new albums that came out this week. I will talk to you soon.
All right, I appreciate that, my friend. Have a good one.